Okay. Okay, so SpaceX. So you may have heard about this guy. He is the second wealthiest human in the world. His name is Elon Musk. Oh, excuse me, Elon Musk. He is a South African American. I mean, they're both cool. So Elon Musk, he founded SpaceX. So in order to talk about the history of SpaceX, we do have to talk about Elon Musk. A lot of people like fixate on Musk. I don't think that he's all that important, like, to the success. Well, he is important to the success of the company, but anyway. But in order to explain how SpaceX came to be, he started PayPal, okay, which you may have heard about. PayPal, and then he sold it, right? He sold that technology for a few $100 million, okay? And with that money, he started Tesla Motors.
How did the people pay him?
I do not know. That would be pretty funny, though. Yeah, Aiden? He's also the founder of the Boring Company, as well as Solar City, Hyperloop. Yeah, the Boring Company, they drill giant holes for underground trains. What? Yeah, the Boring Company, and yes, it was named that because it's a pun. Anyway, in order to raise money for the Boring Company, he sold flamethrowers that were called not a flamethrower. Yeah. Anyway, so he sold PayPal, made a whole bunch of money. He started Tesla, but then he also wanted to do a PR campaign for NASA. Okay, so he wanted to do a PR campaign, like, to get people interested in space again. And his idea was he was going to go to Russia and buy some ICBMs and then launch a greenhouse that would land on Mars. And then have a live feed of this greenhouse on Mars. And that was the whole idea. Like, that was his whole entire idea. So he was like, okay, I'm going to do this. He goes to Russia to buy these ICBMs, and they say no.
I mean, I would sell ICBMs.
Not because it was, like, unsafe or anything. They didn't want to sell him ICBMs because they wanted to charge him more than he was willing to pay, and because they just said, oh, look at this American wanting to send something to space, ha 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 ha. And so he comes home and he's like, yeah, screw those guys, I'm going to make my own rockets. So he literally reads some books on rocketry and starts designing a rocket with, like, 5 other dudes, okay? And he starts a company called Space Exploration Technologies.
This just sounds like a millionaire's criminal space.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So he starts SpaceX, and they literally are like, okay, if Russia doesn't want to sell us rockets, we're just going to learn how to build our own rockets and do it. So he found a few people that used to work at NASA. He hired them. And then he read a whole bunch of books on how to build a rocket engine, and they started designing a rocket engine. And the first rocket that they launched was the Falcon 1. Okay? The Falcon 1. The Falcon 1 was a small lift vehicle. It's a little boy. Okay, and they also bought an island in the Pacific to launch from. The Falcon 1 had one Merlin engine on its first stage. And then it had a second stage that had a little tiny engine called the Kestrel. So all of the engines in the SpaceX family are named after falcons, named after species of falcons. So Kestrel is the smallest species of falcon. Merlin is a species of falcon as well. Okay. And then the Raptor engine is named after falcons, just kind of in a general term. That falcons are raptors, right? They're birds of prey. Okay. If you didn't know that birds of prey are called raptors, now you know. So there you go. Like Velociraptor means ancient bird of prey. That's essentially what it is. Okay. So the Falcon 1 had a Merlin engine on its first stage, and that was what SpaceX developed. And then it also had a Kestrel, which is a little teeny tiny engine. This is a 3D render. Hello? Open image, new tab. There we go. It was little, very simple. It was open.
Okay, that makes sense. I was saying that if they squeeze it close, it's fast.
Or actually, let me think here. It may not have actually had a. It doesn't. Yeah, it actually didn't have a turbo pump. It actually had a. It was pressure fed. It was a pressure fed engine. So they just had high pressure tanks. So they didn't have to worry about any pumps or anything like that. Anyway, so the Kestrel. So the Falcon 1. So the history of the Falcon 1 is really fascinating. Okay. The Falcon 1. So SpaceX got enough money to do 3 test launches. They're like, all right, here we go. 3 test launches. Definitely, this is gonna work, right? We're gonna send. I think that the first Falcon 1 had a wheel of cheese on it. They were gonna try and send a wheel of cheese into orbit. Yeah. So Falcon 1, Flight 1.
They should have made a deal with the cheetahs, specifically cheese.
Okay, so this is a camera on board the Falcon 1. So you can see pre-light. There it lights the Merlin engine. That wasn't water, that was fuel. And there it goes, and then it's going, yeah, go, buddy. And there, you can see it's on this little tiny island in the Pacific. What? No, that's just exhaust. But it's going so well. Go, 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 buddy, go. And then, oh, no bueno. It starts falling. It loses thrust and then starts tumbling over end and falls back to the island and goes boom. And that's when it hit.
Cheese one will fail.
So let's see here. Is this? Oh, that's flight 2. No. Does it not have when it falls? Anyway, so it fell. Didn't work out. Falcon 1, then they did a second flight, and it was going super well. 8. It's going really well. Got up into space. It got into space. Then it went into a staging into a stage. So its first stage burned all of its fuel. That's smoke. So they had separation, but so really quick, watch what happens when it separates. You see how the first stage rubbed up against the second stage engine? That damaged the second stage engine, and it never made it into orbit. Okay, so flight 2 was another failure. Okay, so they fixed the problem of that it wasn't deploying out straight. And it's going, it's doing super well. Once again, we get to the staging portion. First stage is just about ready to burn out here. And there it goes. But as it staged, there was a little bit of a residual thrust from the first stage that pushed it back into the second stage.
Well, how do you not get the rocket? How do you make that not happen?
How do you make it not happen?
Like, how do you make it so that the engine doesn't rub up against the second?
Well, it has to deploy straight out, and then you have to make sure that you don't have any residual thrust from the first stage. Right. Well, they did. They shut down the engine. But what happened is, right when they shut down the engine, they started purging the fuel out the back, any residual fuel. And when they purged that fuel out, it gave a little bit of thrust, and it pushed it back into the second stage. So that caused another failure. So remember, they only had enough money for 3 flights, and all 3 of them were failures. Well, they scrounged up a bunch of money, and Elon went and asked his friends and family for some, for some pocket change. And they scrounged enough money together to make one more launch of the Falcon 1. What? No, it wasn't for fun. It was for, so if they could prove that they could get into orbit, then they could start getting contracts from companies to launch things, right? But no one wanted to fly anything on the Falcon 1 because it had 4 failures, right? 3 failures in a row. Well, on their 4th flight, they had a successful flight. Staging went well. So watch the staging here, right? That's fairing separation. So staging goes correctly this time.
Would you still not want to hire these guys to launch a rocket? So we're getting 25% success.
Right, but that's the thing about rocketry, it's difficult. After this flight, so here's fairing separation. Okay, after this flight, however, the day that this flight was successful, NASA offered SpaceX a contract. And this, Bliss, are you killing your Kerbals?
It's spinning so fast, and I won't stop me.
Just press B.
Oh my God. Shut off this engine. What is this? How do I do that? Who told me that? Or X? X. And then T,
Okay, well, everybody's trying to save Bliss's mission here. Speaking of unsuccessful missions, okay.
How are your rock pieces?
All right, okay, Franklin and Sam, return to your seats, please. I just saw Bliss having a crisis. I'm gonna kill my people. Okay. So the Falcon 1 had a successful flight, and they got a contract from NASA, and they used that money from the contract from NASA to develop the Falcon 9. And the Falcon 9 looks very different today than it did when it was first developed. Very different indeed. However, they used the lessons that they learned from the Falcon 1 to develop the Falcon 9. Okay, so here is an image of the development of the Falcon. Why is this so low quality? That looks better. Okay, so this is the Falcon 9 version 1.0. It was developed to launch the SpaceX Dragon. The Dragon launches supplies to the space station. This was the contract that that NASA gave to SpaceX. They said, if you can develop a rocket that can get a certain amount of mass into orbit, we will give you a contract to launch that stuff into orbit. And the cargo Dragon was born. This is what the first version of the Dragon looked like. It was capsule, capable of going to space and returning. You see those solar panels there, RCS thrusters. What? And Canadarm, yep. Good old Canada, always coming in clutch with those robotic arms, you know. So the SpaceX Dragon was developed, which then led to the Dragon 2.0, which is this guy. Much sleeker design. Here is a rendering of the Dragon docking. Dragon 2.0 with the Dragon 1.0. Unfortunately, this never happened, actually. We never had a Dragon 1.0 and a Dragon 2.0. But, yeah. So, a couple of differences here. The version 1.0, you see these. What are these on the bottom? These are landing legs. Okay. The version 1.0 did not have landing legs because they never attempted to land it. But yeah, the Falcon 9 launch, the first launch of the Falcon 9 was a success. To be completely honest, as a SpaceX fanboy myself, looking at the old Falcon 9, it's just so little. The Falcon 9 today is so much taller, even though they're the same width.
10, 9, 3,
So,
1.
pretty cool.
Lift off.
Why do they have it clamped down? Well, so that it doesn't, you know, fall in to the hole that it's over before it launches. It's clamped there to hold it up, and then they light the engines and then throttle the engines up, and then they can let it go. Why don't we have to? Because Kerbal Space Program is not realistic, and if it was, it would be really hard. Okay. So you can see all the ice coming off of it. It's kind of fun. The Falcon 9 mission 1 was successful. Successfully launched the Dragon to the International Space Station. Pretty cool. Okay, so let me tell you why this is a big deal. These here landing legs. Okay. Every rocket before every launch system was mostly expendable. The space shuttle was, they called it refurbishable, but it wasn't really reusable. Okay? So in 2015, December 21st, 2015, I remember very vividly watching SpaceX was it Orbcom? Yeah, Orbcom 2. I remember very vividly watching this live stream. And they had attempted to land the booster multiple times, but were unsuccessful. So they have a successful launch, takeoff, goes out into space, then they do the boost back burn. They were delivering this into a high Earth orbit, yeah. So I remember, so this is, yeah, so they use the example of throwing a pencil over the Empire State Building and then having it land on its eraser. So all these nerds start freaking out. So they can see it coming in. I remember very distinctly when this happened. So look at all these nerds jumping up and down for joy. So, yada, 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 yada. So this is like the stylized video of it, right? Look at all these people. So these are all engineers that work at SpaceX. Yeah. So pretty fun. This was a really big deal. And in my opinion, it still is. This has completely revolutionized how we think of space travel. Before this day, it was thought to really essentially be impossible to bring something back from space and land it like this. Just the math was too hard, right? But they accomplished it, okay? And the fact that they are able to reuse their Falcon 9 booster is a huge deal, because they don't have to make a new rocket every time they want. Imagine going on a flight, okay? So for instance, my wife and I just bought tickets to go to Hawaii in October, okay? Imagine every time that you flew on a plane, they just threw the plane away, okay? Imagine how expensive it would be to fly on that plane. Well, like, what would we, I mean, what would we even, would we be able to afford those tickets? I don't think so, right? I know that I wouldn't be able to, right? Because they're, I mean, rockets are expensive. Airplanes are expensive. Right? So this is what the landing legs look like after a few missions. You can see that it's all streaked black from the soot. And then shortly after the successful landing back on land that they had a successful landing in the ocean.
Wait, so did they not? So they didn't use the land?
Was the landing patch like anchored down, or was it? What I mean by that is like, was there like support beams from the ocean floor to the pad, or was it just a free floating pad?
So that's an excellent question. So they land their rockets at sea using a barge.
So it's free floating.
Yes, it's essentially its own boat. Okay, so it comes in and lands on this boat in the middle of the Atlantic. Okay.
Rocket and boat. teaming together.
This was 1.1. This was Falcon 9 1.1. There you go, all the nerds celebrating again. This was their first successful landing at sea. This was also a big deal, right? Because they proved that they could land back, you know, on dry land, but to be able to land in the ocean is another big deal, right? Pretty amazing. Okay. And then here's the view from the barge itself. No, they don't. Anyway, so very cool. Being able to reuse their rockets makes a huge difference. And so far, SpaceX is the only company that has successfully reused an orbital booster. So this is a little video that they came out with when they were testing how to do landing, and they did a whole bunch of tests. That was a self-destruct.
Oh,
It sensed that that something had gone wrong, and then they have explosive charges in the space in the rocket that in case something goes wrong, they explode it so that it doesn't land on one. What?
imagine if something went wrong, humans explode.
Oh yeah, that'd be pretty funny. Self-destruct. So close. They were so close on this one. Kaboom.
That one,
Yeah.
Imagine realizing you left your phone on the launch pad.
Yeah, so pretty fun. This is just a compilation. So they successfully landed that one, but it had
so sad.
came in all damaged because Came down a little bit hard.
You're just tired.
Kaboom.
Can you roast marshmallows on that fire?
You could roast marshmallows on that fire. I wouldn't suggest it though. This was the first successful landing that we just looked at. Then this is the first successful barge. They call it a drone ship. Obviously, there's no people on there.
The biggest room in the rocket.
Yeah. So we've talked about Blue Origin, right, with their New Shepard. They land the booster of that, but that is not an orbital rocket. That's just up and down, right? And it's much, much smaller. Electron from Rocket Lab, they have started to do reusability as well. So check this out. The idea, so we've talked about Electron, right, from Rocket Lab,
Yeah.
right? So the Electron from Rocket Lab is a very interesting little launch vehicle. It's very small. In comparison to the Falcon 9, it's teeny, teeny, tiny. It's essentially like Falcon 9 miniature version because it has nine rocket engines on its first stage, 1 second stage engine. It's very similar in like design to the Falcon 9. It's just really small.
I actually I went on the website. As long as you just have money, they'll launch you Electron rocket.
Oh yeah, yep.
Kind of
You can buy an Electron rocket launch for like $10 million. So they launched the Electron, right? And then the first and second stage detach here in just a second. First and second stage detach. Second stage goes and does its thing, goes into orbit, right? The first stage then comes back through the atmosphere. It gets a little bit toasty on the way. Obviously, none of this is real video. Okay, comes back through the atmosphere, and as it does so, it really, really slows down, right? Well, they deploy a hypersonic parachute called a ballute, and then they deploy a steerable parachute. They then catch the booster using a helicopter. And then take it home.
They should just catch it.
Okay, so pretty cool. None of this has been successful yet. They will be doing this soon. What? They have tested they have tested the parachute and the catch system. So here's a real video, not a render, of a test of catching a dummy weight with the, so they use 2 helicopters. One is carrying the dummy weight, which is representing the booster. And then the other has the recovery catch system. Well, then they drop the dummy weight. So there it goes. And it deploys its parachute. And then using an automated computer system, it steers itself, right? And then the recovery helicopter comes around.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. When I heard about this idea, I thought it was nuts. But I love that pilot, man. It's got to be a dang good pilot. And snag. pulls the parachute in, and there it goes.
Does
Just,
they build that way, or
what?
is that dummy weight should be built into like a booster weight? Or?
Yeah, it's, yep, they made it essentially exactly the same size, like dimensions and mass as the booster.
Really small booster.
Yeah, it is a very small booster. They have the Electron is very, very small. It's capable of carrying only 100 kilograms into orbit.
I weigh less than 100 kilograms.
You sure do.
Yeah.
So do I,
I
though.
won't be able to come back.
You could. My guess is that we could launch 2 of you, Sam, on an Electron. Of course, there's no pressurized capsule for you to ride in.
What's 90 pounds in kilograms? That's like
38 kilograms, something like
you
that.
can't launch 2 of me. Wait, no, you can't. You have extra room.
Yeah. Yeah, we could launch 2 of you, no problem.
For some reason, I thought he was 50.
So, rocket reusability.
Wait, do you could offer
Almost 3 of you. Yeah. Yeah, they'd barely be able to get 1 of me up.
We're gonna watch the same
The sandwich. It's crazy, Sam. I'm almost, yeah, that's crazy. I'm like well over two times your weight. Okay. So, questions about rocket reusability and why it makes things cheaper?
How much does the fuel cost? Like, what percentage does the fuel cost? What percentage does the rocket?
So that's an excellent question. The question is, what percentage of a launch is fuel cost?
Yeah.
About 2%.
Oh,
The majority of launching a rocket is, the majority of the cost of launching a rocket is just building the rocket. Right?
they're saving like all their money.
So the launch of a Atlas V, which is a very reliable launch vehicle from the United States. Really cool rocket. I think that they're awesome. The cost to launch one of these is about $400 million. Okay? The cost to launch a Falcon 9 is $90 million. And the Falcon 9 can actually carry more payload than the Atlas V. So, obviously there's a big discrepancy there. 90 million is a lot less than 400 million. That's because the Atlas V has to be built new every time. Whereas the Falcon 9, only about a quarter of it has to be built new every time, because the second stage is not recoverable.
Eventually, what they want to do fully recoverable.
Yep, that's the Starship. The whole purpose of the SpaceX Starship is to be fully recoverable. So the booster comes back and lands, but so does the second stage. This is a really big deal, because not only would this be cheaper than a Falcon 9, it would actually be cheaper than a Falcon 1, tiny little rocket, because all you have to pay for is fuel. Really fascinating idea, the Starship. But here's the craziest idea. The other day, Elon said that they were going to take the landing legs off of the booster, and they were going to catch the booster out of the air with using the launch tower. This is an idea that's so insane it might actually work.
At that point, you'll think the space elevator.
More taking off, more heat.
Yeah, it's true. It sounds insane. The idea, this is not an official render from SpaceX. Can we? Yeah, so they would, the idea is that they were going to use landing legs, but instead of landing legs, now what they're thinking is using a catch system. Which, again, is so crazy, it might just work. I don't know.
Oh, why?
But why? Wait, that's not what I wanted. No. Anyway. Oh gosh. Oh, everything's bad. Okay. The reason why is because if you don't have to put landing legs on your booster, the landing legs are heavy, so you can use that weight to carry more fuel or something like that. Okay, that's all I've got for today in terms of new material. That's where I'm going to end the video. Goodbye.